sponsors listed on the back of your program. We really do appreciate their helping to make this event a success. We appreciate all of you being here today. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Tom Ruff.
Wow, big crowd, big crowd. Last talk of the day, kind of expected it. Hope everybody's had a wonderful day. I certainly have. I've caught a few talks, got a few buttons out front, had some good lunch, so it's been a good day. As we jump into this, talk a little bit about me. My first foray into computer programming was similar to Doug. I actually mowed a few yards and bought a Commodore VIC-20 at age 13. Started writing basic pokes and peeks and for loops and go-tos. I had lots of go-tos back then. I would hope I'm past that at this point. But after I graduated from college, I did some work as a system administrator, and then I moved on into true software development, writing in K and RC, which you might want to remember that for later. Then into Java, and then I did some 8086 assembly, 6502 assembly, and some 370 assembly. The thing I'm probably the most proud of in this picture is the bottom corner. That's me playing beach volleyball with my two children, who are currently both in high school and both participating in the Air Force Cyber Defense competition this year, and they were both in it last year. My daughter, being a senior, will be a team captain this year, which is awesome. And our high school's putting together 4 teams. I do work from home for FireEye, if I haven't mentioned that before. When my boss is looking for me and I'm just happen to be away from the keyboard, my dog there takes care of my keyboard for me and, will punch it once in a while. So, quick agenda, state of software, why Agile. Don't fall into the trap that we're talking about. Then we'll look at some ways to fix it. I'll throw a conclusion out there. I'll ask you guys for questions, and then I've got a couple of really nice giveaways to do at the end. So, you guys are here, so you obviously understand the scope of software. Software is everywhere. Dozens and dozens of operating systems, hundreds of programming languages, thousands of professional software developers. Some are really good and some are not. Hundreds of thousands of applications, billions, millions, even billions of lines of code. Games. Who likes to play games? All right. In your entertainment, we all have Netflix. We all have, I have a TiVo. Some people have TiVos. People are still that far behind. You do your taxes online. You pay your taxes online. It's in healthcare everywhere. You've got software controlling heart monitors and things like that. In the energy sector, you have applications that go out and see how much electricity you've been using and pull it back, so you don't have the guys running around checking the meters on the 23rd of the month anymore, which is a job that my father actually did for a while. It's in transportation. We've all seen the videos from DEF CON where people hacking into cars and turning off the ABS system while they're moving. It's just everywhere. And along with that, everywhere there's problems. You can see that these numbers came from the National Vulnerability Database. The number of reported problems with software that were listed as vulnerabilities. So it's gone up. Although I'm happy to say that in 2015 it did go down a little bit, but still the number went down, but the costs went up. Ponemon Institute reported that the cost of cybercrime was up almost 20% in 2015. The federal government has also passed legislation holding companies liable for not protecting their electronic records. Under the Obamacare, if you're not taking care of your records and you get hacked, $10,000 per record for every person's records who get compromised. And then there's also civil liability. There was a talk a couple of doors down earlier where they mentioned that one large retailer had multiple lawsuits because of a breach they had a couple of years ago. So just the fact that you have to defend yourself in court and you have to defend yourself on the network makes it twice as expensive. I think we can all agree compliance does not equal security. PCI compliant does not mean that you're secure. It means your attack surface is smaller, but it doesn't mean that you're secure. Federal agencies, I worked for the DoD for 6 years. You have DICAP, DITSCAP, FedRAMP, FISMA. All those are just checkboxes. If all you're doing is checking the checkboxes, you're not doing it right. So, any developers in the room? One. May I ask what language? And have you worked in an Agile development environment before? Gotcha. I had that on the first slide. So for those of you who might not be super familiar with it, I'll do a really quick run through. Agile actually began in the 80s when I was still in high school. At that time, you had waterfall, and you had from the development side of it, from the process side of it, somebody would come up with an idea, somebody would storyboard it out, they'd hand off the idea, it would get storyboarded out, they'd hand it off to the developers who would get it done, and then it would go to the testers, and the testers would check it, and then you'd have a loop there where it would go back and forth a few times, and then eventually, sometime 5 years later, you'd actually get something out the door that people were using. As Agile has been born back then, you don't really pass it from team to team anymore. It's organic. So as soon as I get a little piece of code ready, I hand it off to the tester, and it all goes through at the pretty much the same time. The idea is by keeping a team together and keep it focused, which I'll talk about more in a minute, you can do things faster and more efficiently, but we'll argue the more efficiently in a few minutes. Several Agile methodologies grew in the software development community. There was extreme programming, Scrum, adaptive software development, Crystal, feature-driven development, pragmatic programming, and lots more. In 2001, groups from different Agile programming disciplines came together and came up with the Agile Manifesto. Maybe you could give us a little bit of that? It's been a long time. But the idea was to develop software in a way that meets your environment, not necessarily having a cookie-cutter way of handling it from shop to shop. Move a little further forward here. Agile development was added to the Project Manager Book of Knowledge in 2013. Practiced by many organizations all over the world. So if you look at FireEye's doing it, Microsoft does it as far as Agile development goes. Even our retailers are doing it. And just for reference, if you wanted to go get your PMP certification in Agile development, the average starting salary in Georgia is about $86,000 a year for a PMP certified Agile project manager. All right, so now, as I like to say it, the trap's been set. You can see the spider web there. It's lots of commercial and government agencies have fallen in. So we all have ideas. I've had ideas from the time I was a kid of things I would like to do. So the idea with Agile teams is somebody comes up with an idea, you hand it to an Agile team, they go off and do what they do, they have something production ready and bring it back to you. It does have some advantages. I'm a glass half full guy. You can ask any of the guys I work with. Gives developers more visibility and control of the project. They're running the show. Good or bad, they're running the show. And by empowering the team, you're hoping to harness the entrepreneurial spirit. Apple did this back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. They would hand a team a project, and if the project took off and did really well, they were very much rewarded for it. If they weren't, then they were applying for unemployment in San Jose. Other advantages. The idea is to set a sustainable pace. I know we've all been through, my exam's coming up. Got to cram for it. Got to study for it. I got a deadline coming up. Got to hustle. The idea here is to break it up into chunks that are manageable and meetable, and you actually deliver stuff on time. It encourages developers to meet commitments because they are committing to what they agree is a manageable amount of work over a given period of time. It also focuses on the stakeholders, giving you constant prioritization. If today you were trying to develop something to detect CryptoLocker, and then all of a sudden that piece of malware disappears, then it might get deprioritized if you hadn't finished developing it yet. And then the last bullet there is you're supposed to deliver production-ready code with each development cycle. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Disadvantages. So to give a little bit more about my experience, I've worked with Scrum teams on 2 continents, both Europe and North America, commercial and government. I've seen very mature teams of developers who've been, 10, 15 years in the business, 20 years in the business. When the entire team's that way, or vast majority of the team's that way, they're usually very successful. If you take a group of developers with less than 5 years of experience each, throw them into an environment like this, you're going to spend a lot of money and you're going to get a lot of nothing. One other thing is Agile teams don't inherently have a system architect role. You don't have somebody who's looking at the whole picture, which is very, very important. So you can very quickly become too focused and forget the fact that you need to update the back-end processes when you're changing the UI, and you end up with problems in production because you've delivered production-ready code. Another thing is if your stakeholders are argumentative and shuffle priorities drastically with every sprint, it can quickly become whack-a-mole. Oh, we got this bug. That's immediately the highest priority. Let's break the sprint, huddle up, start over. It can, just like with intelligence feeds and alerts, it can quickly become whack-a-mole. It's so focused on short successes that you can lose your long-term vision. If I can get this little bit of work done, I'm going to get patted on the back. And I get this little piece of work done, and I get patted on the back. And I get this little piece of work done, and I get patted on the back. But the thing that I missed was this little piece of work took me here, and this little piece of work took me here, but I wanted to go over there. So it truly requires strong project management, strong leadership, and the stakeholders have to agree on a direction for whatever you're building, or it's not going to work. The other thing is you're always focused on these short-term successes, so there seems to be a tendency for developers to just grab whatever the flavor of the day is that'll do most of what they want to do, write some short augmentation for it, and then push it out the door so that they meet their deadlines. The good side of that is they're collaborating. The bad side of that is not all of these libraries have been very well tested from a functional or from a security standpoint. The other piece of it that I'm going to talk more of on the next slide is easy to silo individual team members when the teams are not co-located. So pair programming goes out the window when you've got guys who are 6 time zones apart, which is where I was with managing teams in Europe when I lived in South Carolina. A little bit more into the disadvantages. You're trying to build a functional team who can build production-ready code with a group of 5 to 7 individuals. It really requires strong multidiscipline backgrounds. I mean, to have a successful team, and you got 7 people, you've got to have an architect, you've got to have a functional tester, you've got to have a load tester, you've got to have a lead developer, you've got to have a couple of developers, you've got to have somebody who can be a security assessor. Usually you need somebody to do a pen test if you're going to be doing any serious releases, and you need somebody who can build the platform for them to work on. And you only get 7 people. And you can't kill your project for 2 weeks if I want to take my kid to Disney. So you really need people who can reach across multidisciplines and are willing to do so. I've seen teams fail epically when they had a developer who also knew how to work on the platform, but he said, I used to do that. Now all I want to do is write code. So when the platform needed a fix and the guy who was better at it was away, nothing would work. And this is my favorite one, my absolute favorite fallacy of Agile development, defining done. So you get a 2-week window, you get a 4-week window, whatever it happens to be, a 1-day window. You're delivering production-ready code. What defines done? Is it done when it actually compiles on the developer's desktop? No. Is it done when you've completed functional testing? No. What about documentation, internal documentation, so that the operations people can support it? What about external documentation, so that other people who are actually buying this product can actually use it? Did you do any security testing? Did you do any load testing? Because you don't know exactly what frame the person's going to be running it under. What seems to happen with done is they do say it's done as soon as it finishes functional testing, and then after the sprint is over, they'll add a week of load testing, a week of security testing, a week for documentation, a week in staging, and then another week for rollouts. And by the time it actually rolls out, they've completed 2 more sprints, so now everybody behind the chain is behind. So your documentation is weeks behind production-ready code. So, but I said I'm an optimist, so we're going to talk about how to fix it. The most important priority, as far as I'm concerned, being a project manager of multiple teams at one point, being a developer at one point, and now being on the security side of the house, build your team extremely carefully. Agile evangelists will preach that changing your team anytime during the life cycle of a product is going to cost you 3 sprints to reestablish your velocity. I can guarantee you that a security breach or non-load tested code is going to cost you a lot more than 3 sprints. We'll throw Target's name out on the table here. What did it cost them for the breach that they had? And they're still paying for it. 6 to 7 guys, you can't have more than 1 kid fresh out of college. You can't do it. There's just not enough. Even if you guys, move to Antarctica, live in an igloo, and spend 24 hours a day together building whatever this is, if you've got more than 1 unexperienced guy, it's too much weight to pull for the rest of the team to actually be successful. It's just not going to happen. And then the last piece here is team stability is not greater than a skill mixture. If you've got a team and they've been assigned a project and the project direction changes a little bit and now you need somebody with some networking background, or now you need somebody with hunting experience, if it's not necessarily software development you're working on, eat the 3 sprints to reestablish a steady velocity and make your mix of skills correct. Take the guy who it's not quite the skill set that you want, move him to another team, bring in the guy that's got the skill set that you want, because if you don't, you're going to regret it. The other side of that is I keep talking about having experienced developers. Agile teams are treated like startups. There was a quote from IBM in the early 90s that said, we have no idea what they're doing. We just know they're going to build something. We give them a bunch of money, and they bring us something back. Even very mature developers are not necessarily motivated to do that. So if you see the responsibility chart up there, I've actually had that hanging in my cube and had people ask me to take it down. But it's important. Commit to what you're going to do, and then do what you committed to. Or to quote the great Ric Flair, if you're going to talk the talk, walk the walk. Along with that, every team member contributes directly to success. If you've got a team member that's not pulling their weight, if you go to the CollabNet documentation for Certified Scrum Master, they encourage the other team members to encourage, pull, everything short of ostracize their team member to get them to actually pull their weight. You got to do it. If you've got a bunch of non-confrontational people that have experience and you got one guy who's not pulling his weight, you're in trouble. That goes back to building your team carefully. And on the project that I'm currently working on, the third bullet is probably one of the biggest pain points in my life. The team will accept 120 points worth of work, and they know they can only do 60. But they still accept all of this into their sprint, and then they don't make it. And then I've got to go back to the customer on the other end and say, or the stakeholders or whoever it happens to be, and say, we were really trying to get that feature out to you this quarter, but it didn't happen. And when it happens 2 or 3 quarters in a row, it becomes a real sore spot for the customers and for the people who have to break the news. So commit to what you can do, and then the bottom point is actually get it done. Collaboration. We're talking about multifunctional discipline, or multidiscipline personnel. They need to communicate about everything. The second bullet that says pair programming is not just about code review. I'm a GIAC certified secure programmer. I look at things differently than the guy who's got the CIS degree and 10 years of software development experience, churning out code for brochureware. When he looks at my code, he's going to look at different things than I look at when I look at his code. It helps each team member become more multidisciplined. I can't say enough about it. I could spend 2 hours talking about just that. The other thing is, or the next thing on the list, stand-ups are not optional and require details. For several months, I had a team member who came into one of the Scrum meetings and he said, I'm working on integrating single sign-on into this, this, and this. That's all he would say every day for 3 months. And in the end, I went back and fixed it. But you need to come into your stand-ups every day as described, on time, pass the ball around, say what you got to say, give enough details to know that if you do need help, the people who are there who might be able to help you can step up and help you right away. You're trying to develop a product as if you were a startup and get it out the door. You can't just hold information to yourself. Stakeholder involvement. If something changes, they need to get involved right away. And at the end of every sprint, they need to check off the work that was done and accept it, and then reprioritize as quickly as possible so you can get the next sprint started. If you don't keep up with reprioritizing it, we're not going to end up over there. We're going to end up somewhere out in the parking lot. And don't be tempted to single out team members because of their specialties. As I said, I've had Security Plus, GX Certified Security Programmer, but I shouldn't be the only one who's doing security assessments on the software that the team's putting together. If you do that and I win the lottery, your team is immediately in trouble. And one more thought on that one before I move on. There's one particular team member of mine that I said I would mention at some point during this talk so that he would have to actually listen to the whole thing. So George, buddy, this one's for you. All right. So everybody's heard this military term. Keep it simple, son. Modern applications have dozens of moving parts. Databases, you've got some stuff, you've got an operating system, you've got an application platform, you've got a front end. If you're doing model view controller, you can have that in actually multiple languages. You can have queues for handling load. But as Mr. Einstein so eloquently said here, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. Along with that, I have another quote that I love to put in at this point. It says there are two ways of constructing a software design. One way is to make it so simple that there are obviously no deficiencies, and the other is to make it so complicated that there are no obvious deficiencies. The first method is far more difficult, but when you pass it off to your operations people and you pass it off to your customers who are actually using it, it works. If you make it so complicated that nobody can understand it, there's a very high probability that nobody can actually run it. Understand your risks. Understand what you're building. The upper management has handed the keys to the kingdom to the development team or the security operations team if you're not doing software development. Know your applications. Know where they are. Know what's supposed to be there. The same thing you hear about networks. I didn't know that router was over there sending SNMP data to Beijing. Or I didn't know that firewall was configured to allow all ports outbound. In software, I didn't know this guy was using Go, and he was using a version that was like 2 years old, because that's about how long Go's been around. Know your environment. Test your environment. Test it often. Every build should kick off some automated testing. Every patch should kick off a larger set of testing. Every release should kick off an even bigger set of testing. Another thing, test your third-party solutions. The example that I love to use is struts. When struts came out, there was some example code that show you how to put together your model view controller really, really quick. But it had a cross-site scripting flaw in the example. I can count dozens of applications that I've worked on and I've been to that actually copy and pasted this example code into their view, and now you have cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in your production application. And it takes like 90 seconds to test it and find it. So you've got to test your third-party solutions in addition to what you're working on. Train your development team. As I said earlier, the GX Secure Software Programmer, it's no joke. It's a hard test. I studied for it for a couple of weeks, and that was with to renew it. So I'd already gotten it once. So I spent a couple of weeks studying for it, going through the materials again, and it still was hard. And that's what you need. You need something to make these guys think, not only about this little piece of code that they're writing, but then the piece of code that's running on this application server, that's running on this network, that's available to this environment. Even if the environment you're talking about is your customer's environment. Think about how they're going to use it. Think about how they're going to abuse it so that you don't end up with something that you could have very easily taken care of and have to rush out patches or give somebody some money back, or even worse, have your name and your company's name spread all over the news and the internet and Twitter and everything else. The last piece there is you've got to have your stakeholders, your scrum master, your project manager all got to sit down together and work out, reduce your risks where it makes sense. If you're working on a piece of software that's going to be in a car that has absolutely no external network connections, maybe you don't have to worry so much about SSH not being patched. But if that same issue is on a Wi-Fi router that's sitting on a hospital's network that has connection to all the other devices, then that's probably going to be a much higher priority. So, see if there's anybody has any questions for me at this point. I do have a little more content, but I was going to take a break here, catch a breath. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Please. I'm having just a little trouble hearing you. Actually, I got a lot of suggestions for you. I don't see anybody from his company in here, but Tim Toms does a really, really great web application pen testing course. Okay, so that's the longer developer course. That's 4 days, I think. It's actually amazing. I took it this year, actually, just as a refresher course for myself, even though I haven't been doing web development. But it did give me, on the detection side of the house, it gave me some more things to look for. So I was looking at it from that side. Another thing is the GX Secure Java Programmer, if you're doing stuff in Java, or they also have the ASP C# version of it. Is amazing, absolutely amazing. And then afterwards you can get the certification, which is good for 4 years, and then you can renew it again for another 4 years, which is what I just did. It will make you think about it, and they look at it from both a Java platform or a C# platform and at the web platform. So there was tons of questions in there about how to close known vulnerabilities in Tomcat and JBoss and IIS if you were on the other side of it. So those are things that can do it. Another thing is if you've got access to somebody who's a pen tester, read some of the books that they read. I don't have any names right off the top of my head, but I can give you my card. You can send me an email. I can definitely send you some suggestions. Web Applications Hacker's Handbook is a good one. Thank you, James. So lots of information out there. The biggest thing is to pick your platform, whether it's going to be on the Microsoft side of the house or the Java side of the house or PHP or whatever it happens to be. And then focus there, because there's so much information, it'll seem like diving into an ocean if you try to tackle more than one platform at a time. So pick a platform. The concepts are going to be the same. You just pick up the syntax when you go to the next one. So that's my best advice. Pick one, dig into it, and then the concepts will carry as long as your career goes. So I do owe some credit around. Lots of recommendations there about the numbers at the front. The picture from My Fellow Americans, which happens to be one of my top 5 favorite comedies, which was filmed about 3 hours away from here. Let's see. No. I'll mention the how Apple does it. That's where one of the quotes came from that I read. Then the bottom one there, we were talking about Target. So there's the CNN article about Target. These slides are going to be up on the BSides website, so you don't have to try to write anything down or take a picture. This article, the second one on here, the one from Security Week, is actually another good place to get started. 7 considerations to reduce your attack surface. And OWASP has a ton of information out there. If you're on, it doesn't matter which side of the house you're on, just pick one. And then finally, I want to thank you guys for hanging around at 4 o'clock at the end of the con. Thank you to BSidesAugusta for allowing me to speak and for this great polo. A thank you to Pentest Fail for talking me into submitting my first CFP last year. Thank you to FireEye for giving me the opportunity to have the day off yesterday to go to the Security Ending Conference and then be here today. And then, of course, a big thank you to SkyDogCon, the con that I happen to be happy to assist put together. The logo's down in the bottom corner there. So if nobody's thought of any more questions, I've got a couple of items here to give away. So last call for questions. So Southward has given this great lockpick set for me to give away. So back on my very first, or on my agenda slide, I had a line that says, "Don't fall into the trap," from the movie My Fellow Americans. Who can finish the quote for me? Don't fall into the trap. Nobody? He pulls the string on the presidential doll. It says, "Don't fall into the trap." Nobody? All right. Okay. Oh, I am going to tell you the answer. Probably in the given political climate, it's probably the wrong thing to say, but it's "Don't fall into the trap. Democrats are full of crap." So, let's see. Think of another good question. Who can remember what my first computer was? Right here. Commodore VIC-20, yes sir. And for the Hacker Playbook, which was graciously donated by BSidesAugusta. He's disqualified. We'll see if anybody can remember 2 of the processors that I wrote assembly language for. There were 3. Or I'll take. How about one? Who wants? How about? Yes, sir.